Hello everyone, my name is Bryan Freund, and this is my final YouTube presentation. So, I decided to interview my chef here at Disney's Yacht and Beach Club, Chef Darren Lanford. He has been at the Yacht and Beach Club for 13 months. He's actually been there on and off for many years now, because he actually started where I am as an intern, but he's been in the industry for 19 years. So, right now he's the head pastry chef at the Yacht and Beach Club Bakery. So, let's get right into it. I asked him about the human resources and how helpful it was, and he told me it was as helpful as people make it. Being such a big company, they cover everything basically. So, discipline, personal issues. And he's also mentioned how full-time can get many benefits. And one of the ones that was pretty cool that he mentioned was, if you want to take a class at a community college and you can prove that it is part of your job, it can definitely help your job. Disney would actually pay for it, so I thought that was pretty cool. As far as communication went, they said they use basically every type of communication. So whenever he gets information from his bosses, he usually filters out what he needs to get to the bakery, and then just gives that information to his sous chefs. Unless it needs to be given to someone directly, then he just contacts them directly or stops by to find them and lets them know. And then he also uses texting, phone calls, email. And then of course we do sometimes have meetings, but of course the bakery is a 24-hour operation, so we don't always have time to get everyone into the meeting, so those are more rare. And then we also do have a logbook in the bakery that we use to communicate back and forth between just the different employees. It's not really management who uses it, but they do check it, so just in case we need to let someone know on another shift to do something. And then I also asked him about motivating his staff. He said to tailor your message to your audience. So what he meant was, depending on what type of worker they are, that's how you want to motivate them. So he gave me a kind of a rundown, 20%, 40%, 20%. I know that adds up to 80%, not 100%, but I didn't ask. So basically the bottom 20% of your workers are the slackers who just need to keep fire under their butt. So in order to motivate them, you got to keep a constant eye on them and then keep them on task. So the middle 40% are the everyday workers who just come to work and then want to go home. So you basically don't give them too much other stuff to do unless you're working on it with them. Otherwise, they're not going to be motivated, they're just going to be mad. And then the top 20% are the go-getters, the really ambitious people who try to always outdo themselves. So those are the people that you give special projects to. And then if you if you need something done by next week, just say, here, do this. I want to see what kind of dessert you can plate up. Show me by next week. And then you can just expect them to be able to do it, because that's how hardworking and how ambitious they are. And then also for motivating your staff, you don't want to scream and holler, because Chef has told me he has worked with many people who scream and holler and it gets nothing done. It just aggravates everybody. So I thought that was pretty accurate on that point. So I also asked how he dealt with conflicts, like between himself and staff, and then staff and staff. Being in a union is kind of difficult. He can, whenever something comes up, he can say stop, but that's as much as he can do from that point, just because it might get into a he said, she said type of conundrum. So from there on, whatever the conflict is, they need to bring it into a private area with a representative from the union, a management, someone as a witness, just so everything can be backed up. And then as far as like if there's any miscommunications, he just handles those directly, because those are just normal common errors that can be taken care of directly. And then one of the most important things he said was to break down rumor mills, because he's been working in this industry long enough that he knows rumor mills are very prevalent. So if you don't want to cause conflict, you got to break it down at the source. And just working here for about 2 months, I've seen the rumor mills build, and they are terrible. Alright, so I also asked my chef about stress, and he said one of the most important things was to separate work from home. So the second he walks out the door, he leaves everything behind him. He doesn't stress about anything. He doesn't dwell on anything. He just goes home and doesn't worry too much about the bakery. The only people who can contact him directly are his sous chefs, and that's only in case of emergency, like bakery's burning down, someone chopped off their finger, what have you. And then while you're actually there, time management and control are great for stress, because if you're controlling everything, you shouldn't be too stressed out about everything, because you should be able to handle it. And then if there is a large problem, you shouldn't have to, don't stress out about that, just delegate. Delegate everything, then it'll get done, it'll run smoothly, it should be fine. And then his final recommendation was lots and lots of coffee, which I don't drink coffee, but I can see his point. So I also asked him what the recruitment was like, because I was recruited a different way for the job since I'm in the college program. So we were all interviewed back at school. Now as far as hiring and recruiting people for the bakery, it's a bit different. Like every 6 months at Disney, there is a shift switch. So people who are interested in transferring to different areas, they get they have the opportunity to work in the bakery, and the bakery can hire them or not. And of course that happens with seniority first, so whoever's been there the longest, like 25 years, they get the first choice. And then hiring is also done through references. So if we have a position open and somebody knows somebody from school or back home that's really good for the position, they reference them. Then it's the typical interview process, and from there on in, it's basic training on the job. And then there's also something that I didn't know, forced positions. So if chef has a open slot that it needs to be filled, and he hasn't filled it yet, and somebody has been moved, Disney has the right to put them in that spot if they are capable of doing the job. So that was pretty interesting. And then he says it's not really hard to find staff, because there's always a pool of employees looking to transfer or try something new, so it's not really hard to find staff. And then as far as training staff, I asked him about like some mistakes he's made or what he's learned from them, and he said like the most important thing with training staff is to let the staff know that you've made more mistakes than them, so you know what you're talking about. And like I'll get into this later with mistakes that he's made, but if you're able to show that you know what you're talking about, then they will learn, and it's all about learning and training anyway, so that's the point he tried to make there. As far as employee turnover, he says it's really dependent. The bakery doesn't really fire too many people. It's mostly voluntary leaving, and it's usually outside events that can't be controlled. It's like there's a big disaster and somebody has to go home, or somebody's pregnant and they want to move home back with their family. That's normally is. So it can be from like 0% turnover to a large number, but the average is like 3 people in and out of the bakery a year. So I also asked about the pros and cons of being a manager, and he says being a manager is what you make of it, so it can be really great or it can be really bad depending on how you handle it. He said you get to meet a diverse group of people, which I believe, since I've already met so many different types of people. And then he also said it's pretty funny to watch people with a generation gap. So someone like me who's really new to the industry working with someone who works the morning shift who's a veteran in this industry, to see us try to work together, which I agree is pretty fun. And then he said it's really rewarding to see all the hard work pay off, which it is, because he's at the command for that, and when something goes well, he feels really good about it. And then, of course, he loves the kitchen, so that's always a plus. So some of the cons is the industry has become very over-sensationalized. So whenever he has new people, they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the next top baker or whatever. He's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. Yeah, like the television industry is very over-sensationalized it, so it's kind of taken away from what it used to be. And then another thing is that he hasn't been able to see the bakery too often since he has all the management duties. So I can see how that kind of brings him down. But he has to do his job, so kind of win-lose. So I asked him how his perspective has changed. So for the industry, I just mentioned this, but he said the next generation is in trouble because when he went to school, it was a large majority were actually there to learn the craft, learn the history of everything, actually interested in it, and not just interested in like the fame of it. But nowadays, there are a lot of people who are in it just because it's pretty popular right now. So I totally see what he means. And then as far as managing, how his perspective has changed, he used to call his old boss Houdini because he would see him in the bakery one day and then, or one moment, and he'd disappear for the rest of the day. And then, so he would always nag on him about disappearing all the time. But now that he is a manager and sees how many duties that his old manager had, he understands where he always was. He was always doing all the extra work that had to be done. So, as far as what works well for managing, I touched on this earlier, but delegating. So like in stressful situations, if you need something done, delegate the duties. Don't try to do everything on your own. It's not going to work. It always fails. And then he actually told me about this one day where they had set up an entire thing for a banquet. It took 3 hours to get all the plates, and then they find out last minute that the party had doubled, so they had to plate everything. So rather than running around crazy, he went back to the bakery, said, you do this, I need you to do that, grab some plates, and then they did all the extra plates in half the time, because that's how hard they worked, and how smoothly it ran. So I believe delegating is a pretty good tool. So as far as early mistakes, I took this as early mistakes in the industry. So everyone makes mistakes. It's impossible not to make mistakes. Otherwise you won't learn from them. So one thing he told me was he developed a method when he was making stolen bread. One day he was making it and he used to just add all the ingredients just one on top of the other. So one day he got pulled away in the middle of scaling and he forgot where he was, and then later he learned that he forgot to add the sugar. So from now on, whenever he makes something like that, he puts all the flour down and makes little pockets to add the ingredients in, so he knows what he's added. And I totally know what he means because I've done that before as well. So yeah, mistakes are good. They help you learn. Otherwise, if something does go wrong and you haven't made the mistake, you won't know what happened. But if something goes wrong along the road, you're like, oh, I forgot to add some water, or I didn't add enough water, or didn't mix it long enough. That can be really helpful for you, and if you ever train someone. And then finally, I touched on his personal philosophy for managing people. He said his is similar to Disney's because a lot of it is just following procedure. Whatever happens, like if a conflict happened, follow procedure. Don't step away from that, otherwise there could be trouble. But one of the big things he said for managing people was mostly accountability. Who can you rely on? If you need something done, who can you rely on to do it? And that goes back to like the top 20%. If you need something done that's away from the original job duties, go to those people who you know are able to do it. So yeah, that is my presentation. I learned a lot from Chef Darren. Actually learned a lot more than I thought I would from this interview, so it was really cool to see his perspective on everything. And thank you for listening.